Hello, good evening, good day, everybody, and welcome back to the Ask Abhijit show. After a break of a week, I was traveling last weekend, so apologies for not doing a live stream last weekend, but here we are back again. A lot has happened, and I hope you're all doing very well. Let me first of all see who all is there on the live chat. Firstly, I would like to thank Board Ningombam, Geopolitical Dube, and Harshvardhan Thala for purchasing a membership. I really appreciate that. I never ever ask anyone to buy this, but you all still do this. So thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Now let's see who all is there on the live chat. I can see Sanatani Sagar, Pritam Sharma, Dheeraj Singh, Pulkit Grover, Sparkling Lotus, Bhushan, Suryansh Kapil, Crazy Brain, good evening. Ashish, Mayuri Krishna, Discombobulation, Pranav Jadhav, Mebang Kitlang Kharbudon from the far east of India. Namaste. Bishwajit Lodh, Chetan Deshpande, Sahil Debnath, Anant Pai, Shrij Ramachandraya Nava. Hey Aishwarya, Max Gaming, Shravani T, Kadamba Guy, Chetan Aradhya, Yashodeep Avhad, Starlord, Kapalin, Rishikesh, Uttarkar, MISC, Vladimir Vladimirovich Putin, Random Skull, Devasura, Abhishek Pandey, Ajinkya Pawar, Bhai Bhai, KG Bhai, Rajat Verma, Calixo, Abhishek Saini, Tanay Chandra, Samana Satish, Vivek Singh, Shagun Chopra, good to see you, ma'am. Slayer, Arsh, Arish, Two Idiot, NRI's Fairy Tale, Supratim Datta, Jagdish Mali, Om Bekerikar, Somik Banerjee, Anti Motion Clips, VVS 2400, Disha Plays, Baba Abhijit Chavda, Der Kaiser, Alvin Rodriguez, Grimzo Bad, and so many other people. I won't be able to greet you all individually. Apologies, but thank you so much, all of you, for being on this live stream. So I'm sure everybody wants to talk about the big thing. So let's see what are the questions we have. I'm going to take questions from the comments that the questions that you've asked in the comments, and then if there is time, I'll take questions from the live chat as well. Let's take some quick questions. First of all, why don't you take questions from the live chat these days? Because I want to answer the best possible questions. See, lots of times what happens is that when you're taking questions from the live chat, you don't always get the best possible questions. I often get questions that I've answered lots of times. I see. First of all, please understand, no question is stupid, no question is bad. I am happy to answer all questions, but there are some questions I've answered over and over again, like, when are we taking back POK? What if the British or the Turks never invaded India, and so on. Some questions that are standard questions, everybody has them, especially new viewers, and I've answered them in the first 10, 20, 30 episodes of Ask Avijit. So, during a live, if I'm taking questions from a live stream, I typically get a lot of those. So it's hard for me to find really good questions that will really give value to all of you. That's why I prefer to take questions from the comments. Okay, next question. Are you hacked? Why are you live streaming for 7 days straight? So once again, that's in connection to the question I just answered. I have done so many live streams, and there are so many questions I've answered that I would prefer not to take them again, and I would prefer to take questions that are relevant to what's happening right now and more important things in the world. But I've answered all kinds of questions in the past, so I'm just putting out old episodes on a loop on two live streams. One is the history and geopolitics live stream, and another one is the science episode, science, physics, astrophysics, all that stuff. Two live streams going on. Anybody who wants to watch, go ahead and watch. Watch as long as much time as you have, and you may get answers to questions that you may have. So it's there's nothing wrong with the channel. When somebody gets hacked, it's typically something bad that happens, right? So I am running these live streams on a loop, like a bunch of episodes together, 20, 30, 40 episodes on a loop, so that whoever wants to watch can check out the old live streams. So many wonderful questions you all have asked in the past, and I've answered them. So you'll get to see those over there. So there's no issue. It's still going on. Right now, there are 3 live streams on the channel, including this one, which is an actual live stream. Okay. Right, here we are. My views on the Trump and Zelensky meeting. Looks like the special military operation is going to end. Amisha says, what exactly happened between Trump and Zelensky? What led to the situation? Zelensky was thrown out of the White House. This is crazy. Zelensky was lambasted and silenced by Trump and JD Vance on air, live on air yesterday. If Zelensky has any shame left, he should resign with dignity. The more he delays and continues his comedic rant, the more troublesome his fall from his reign will be. What's your take on his future? Will he escape to any of the European countries as he has to relinquish power post ceasefire, possibly this year? Okay, yesterday was incredible. What happened, right? Um, there was this live press briefing from the Oval Office in the White House. You have President Trump and Zelensky sitting in these two chairs, and to President Trump's left, you have JD Vance, the Vice President, and Marco Rubio, the Secretary of State. To the right of Zelensky, you have some Ukrainian people, and the whole room is filled with media people. And this is about 45-50 minutes long, the entire video that you can find on social media. Initially what happened is that you got these little clips that came out of this entire blow up that happened. Zelensky and Trump essentially shouting at each other, talking over each other, JD Vance intervening, and it was horrific to watch. And it looked like Zelensky was ambushed and they brought him there to humiliate him or to give him a dressing down. That's how it looked, right? But then if you watch the entire video, the 45-50 minute video, you will see that Zelensky started this entire matter. He was being rude, disrespectful. He was looking for a fight. You'll find in life sometimes some people are high on drugs or high on alcohol, and they go out there on the streets or wherever they go looking for a fight. They're looking for a fight. Zelensky looked like that. He looked like he was high on something, some substance, and he had come there looking for a fight. And he was provoking both Trump and JD Vance. And Trump stayed calm as long as he could. And then at some point, Zelensky starts pointing at JD Vance and saying that if you raise your voice, it's not going to make you right, and that sort of thing. How disrespectful can you be to your hosts? And especially when your host is the most powerful nation in the world. And especially after the fact that Zelensky is alive because of the support he has received the past 3 years or 3 years plus from the United States and NATO. Right? It was crazy. It was incredible. The guy, Zelensky, seems to have lost it. Incredibly rude and disrespectful. The most powerful country in the world, the most powerful president or head of state in the world, you don't disrespect that guy. Oh man. So this situation was caused by Zelensky. He was essentially trying to negotiate a deal live in front of the cameras. You don't do that live in front of the cameras. Whatever diplomacy negotiations you want to do, you do it behind closed doors. When you go to the Oval Office and you have the cameras in front of you, you have to behave with a certain amount of dignity, and you have to be tactful and diplomatic when the cameras are rolling. You know what we saw yesterday was what generally happens behind closed doors. Behind closed doors, you can yell at each other, negotiate, push back, bully, whatever you want to do. You don't do that when the cameras are rolling. You got to see something that generally happens, that always happens behind closed doors. That's a first. I've never seen that. I have been telling you for the past 3 years, as long as this show has been going on, the Ask Abhijit show, that behind closed doors, diplomacy is all about hard power. It's about arm twisting. It's about bullying. It's about ultimatums. There's nothing nice about diplomacy behind closed doors. But we saw that yesterday with the cameras rolling, and Zelensky he tried his best to disrespect his hosts. And there came a point where Trump said enough is enough. And he came there with an agenda. He came there with demands. You don't make demands when you have zero leverage. What leverage does Zelensky have? Absolutely nothing. He is living and breathing at the pleasure of the President of the United States. The moment funding and support stops, he is dead man walking. It looks like there was some kind of instigation from the EU nations as well, because the moment this happens, a whole bunch of completely insignificant and irrelevant EU leaders put out the same tweet supporting Zelensky. Interesting thing, very interesting thing happened. So it looks like this is the beginning of the end for Mr. Zelensky, unless the EU is willing to support him and ensure his safety and survival. The man is a quisling. The man is a traitor to his own people and his own nation. He has colluded with a foreign power, with the Biden regime, uh, and participated in the destruction of his nation's demography, his nation's human resources, his nation's wealth, his nation's infrastructure, his nation's sovereignty, his nation's prosperity, his nation's future. That's what he has done. That man is that's what a quisling is. Victor Quisling was the original Quisling, and he did not meet a very good end. Zelensky is a Quisling. He's going to go down in history as a traitor to his people and his nation. And it just generally doesn't end well for such people. So, yes, eventually Trump said enough is enough, and the meeting ended. And there was supposed to be the signing of a deal, the minerals, the mineral wealth deal, in which Ukraine would hand over its mineral wealth essentially to the US because of all the wealth the US has expended in supporting Ukraine the past 3 years. So that deal did not happen. It was not signed, and Zelensky and his entourage were asked to leave the White House. They were essentially kicked out, thrown out of the White House, like Amisha says down here. And I don't blame Trump or JD Vance for what happened. It was entirely Zelensky's doing. So, yeah, incredible scenes yesterday. Life is Meaningful says Zelensky abuses vice president in front of Trump in the White House. Do you think Zelensky is the worst capable leader or even diplomat for any country? So, yes, Mr. Zelensky he was caught on camera, on audio, abusing JD Vance. He used a Russian word, not as a Ukrainian word, a Russian word, suka, which is a naughty word in the Russian language. I'll just say that much, okay? So he uses a Russian swear word under his breath, but it was caught on audio. He used that word for JD Vance, his host, the vice president of the United States. What sort of a person does that? I just don't get it. I cannot think of any worst head of state in the world right now. Of course, Zelensky is not a democratically elected person. He's a dictator, like Trump has said. I said that a year ago. Zelensky, he is now a dictator. I think there was supposed to be, according to the Ukrainian constitution, an election at whether it was March or June or whatever last year. And beyond that, Zelensky was in power illegitimately, unconstitutionally. So he's a dictator. And he's been propped up by the US essentially, and he goes to the White House and he calls JD Vance suka. Incredible person. Okay, the priest of Varanasi has two questions. How long could Ukraine survive if Donald Trump completely cuts off the US aid given to them? Can Europe collectively save them? Why did Zelensky not accept the peace treaty proposed by Donald Trump when Ukraine is in a weak negotiating state? What would happen if the US cuts off military aid to Ukraine after this? Trump is, I'm pretty sure, in the process of cutting off all aid to Ukraine. I'm sure some announcements have already been made. I'm not going to go and look into the details right now because we are in a live stream right now. But yes, the process has started. Trump is going to cut off aid to Ukraine. See, Trump came to power with a number of promises. He made a number of promises, right? One of the promises is that he was going to end the Ukraine war essentially the first day of his presidency. He has said it's been a bit longer than that. People understand it takes time, but he's already made the moves and taken actions and reached out to Putin and spoken with Putin on the phone, etc. And the process of the end game of the Ukraine war is already in motion. So Trump is keeping his promise. right? And the only question then is that what happens to Ukraine? What terms does Ukraine get? What happens to Zelensky, which is not that important. Ukraine is more important, not Zelensky. So essentially, the fate of Ukraine will be decided by Trump and Putin. Zelensky is not a legitimate leader. He's a dictator. He's a puppet. He's a puppet of the US. And puppets don't get to make choices. And he has no leverage over anyone. He is alive and breathing at the pleasure of his master, his hegemonic master, the US. Uh, so, look, what's going to happen now is Trump has no interest anymore in talking with Zelensky. He made it very clear that we can't do business with this attitude of yours. That's what he told Zelensky. And so what's going to happen now is that Trump and Putin are going to have a round of discussions. Their minions, subordinates, like the Secretary of State of the US, Rubio, and Sergei Lavrov of Russia, they will meet multiple times, and they're going to negotiate the parameters of the ceasefire. And Putin's going to get what he wants. He's going to keep the territories his nation has conquered from Ukraine, and a number of other things. And I'm sure the end game, the deal between the US and Russia, will include the expulsion from power of Volodymyr Zelensky. I'm pretty sure. So it's almost like I'm making a prediction here. Why did Zelensky not accept this? Because it's the end for him then, right? Why is he relevant today? Because the media has propped him up, has lionized him as this great defender of Ukraine, right? He's relevant in the world today because the war is going on. The moment the war ends, his relevance, legitimacy, everything ends. So he wants this war to keep going on. And the EU leaders also seem to want this war to keep going on. Because their legitimacy also is to some extent tied to the war. And the choices they have made in the past 3 years tie them to the fate of Zelensky. So Ukraine is not in a weak negotiating state. Ukraine has zero leverage. Ukraine has no more say in its eventual fate and destiny. So the US will essentially cut off aid to Ukraine. If the EU wants to step in and give some aid, we'll see how that goes. It won't end very nicely for whoever does that in the EU as well. I don't think Europe can collectively save Ukraine. I'm sure they can give some money to Ukraine, but what about the arms and ammunition that Ukraine needs to keep fighting the war? Does Europe have any of that? They don't have much of that. Does France want to spend a significant amount of its GDP propping up Zelensky and continuing this war, which has no real benefit for anyone? I don't think so. It doesn't make any sense economically. So Ukraine will not survive once Donald Trump cuts off aid. So the eventual fate of Ukraine is going to be decided by Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin. Donald Trump has no interest in the war. Putin knew that he just needs to keep the war going. I've said this so many times. It's been a slow war scenario. It's been a frozen conflict by design. If Putin wanted, he could have flattened Ukraine. He chose not to, because there's no point doing that, right? And so on. So yeah, that's the situation right now. Pranay Paul says Trump tells Zelensky that without US military aid, the war would have ended in 2 weeks, and accuses him of gambling with the lives of millions and risking World War III. Is Trump right about the gambling part? Has Western support prolonged the war rather than securing a resolution? What do I think? Trump is absolutely right. Without US military aid, without the spares, without the supplies, without the arms, ammunition, the javelins, what not the Americans have supplied, the tanks, and so on, Ukraine would not have lasted 2 weeks. Zelensky said that Trump is echoing Putin, and Ukraine would not have lasted 3 days. Even with US aid, Putin could have flattened Ukraine. He simply did not use his air force, except using it very sparingly. And whatever argument some people want to make, they're going to fall flat today. I've been saying the same thing the past 3 years. And today's situation vindicates what I've been saying the past 3 years. Putin's air force is intact. He has barely used it. Just a few Sukhois here and there, older versions, a few helicopters, very little. If Putin had chosen, he could have flattened, destroyed Ukraine in less than 3 weeks, in less than 2 weeks. Uh, so yes, Trump is absolutely correct. Without U.S. military aid, there's no way Ukraine would have lasted 3 years, let alone 3 weeks. Now, why did Trump say that Zelensky has been gambling with the lives of millions and risking World War III? You may remember during the Jakarta G20 summit, which was in 2022, in the last quarter of 2022, the Ukrainians uh, they launched a missile into Polish territory in Poland and struck a village, and it caused at least one or two casualties, deaths of Polish citizens. And then they blamed Russia for this. The Ukrainians, Zelensky and his commanders knew that they had launched the missile, but they blamed Russia for it to invoke one of the clauses in the NATO treaty that if one NATO member is attacked, everybody has to respond. So he was trying to launch World War III right there, Zelensky. Right? He's been doing that consistently. He's gambling with the lives of millions. He has tried his best to spark off World War III multiple times. I'm just giving you one example. Look it up. During the Jakarta summit, G20 summit in 2022, he tried that. He tried this. He tried to pull this stunt. So yeah, Trump is right about the gambling part. Zelensky has been gambling with the lives of millions. He's been trying to spark off World War III. And Western support has simply prolonged the war. What's the resolution? Russia is going to retain the territories it took in 2022 itself, and after then it's been a slow meandering war. So Trump is absolutely right. Absolutely right. Geopolitical Dubey and Pranay Paul ask these questions. Why are the EU countries, which are heavily affected by this Ukraine war, why are they supporting Zelensky, whereas the US has lectured Zelensky yesterday? And with European leaders and even US politicians rallying behind Ukraine after Trump's meeting with Zelensky, will this actually change anything on the ground? Or is this just performative outrage? Good question. Also, given Trump's recent actions, do you think he's aligning more openly with Putin and Russia? Excellent questions. Uh, yeah, we're trying to go into the mindset and why are things being done, and why are these decisions being taken by so and so people. So look, we have to understand how do we analyze what's happening. I mean, the EU leaders, like you mentioned, are supporting, they're rallying behind Zelensky. A whole bunch of EU leaders have put out these tweets, etc. I'm not sure if I can look it up right now, but like a large number of irrelevant, insignificant EU leaders have put out tweets in support of Zelensky, even some American politicians and so on. So does this change anything on the ground, or is this just performative outrage? That's a great question. You see, a tweet, if you know me, if you are a long time follower of the Ask Abhijit show, you will know that I keep on emphasizing that there's a gigantic difference between words and actions. Right? Words don't matter. The only thing that matters is your actions. A tweet is verbal support. Right? Verbal support. Oh, I support you. Yeah, pat on the back. I support you. But are they going to actually support him on the ground? Are they going to, send money and send weapons? And are they even capable of sending weapons and money? So clearly, this is performative outreach. This is a performative performance, essentially. It changes nothing on the ground. Can the EU nations together muster up sufficient money on an ongoing basis and sufficient weapons and arms and ammunition on an ongoing basis to keep the war going? They can't. This is called virtue signaling. And So now let's look at what are the interests of the major parties in this entire matter. We know what Russia's interests are. Why did the war begin? Because of NATO's relentless eastward expansion, and eventually red lines were crossed, and Russia decided that we have no choice but to ensure that Ukraine remains neutral, and we have no choice but to safeguard the Russian-speaking populations of Ukraine, who are being essentially massacred by Ukraine since 2014. Uh, the Luhansk, Donetsk regions, etc. So Russia waited as long as possible. I think they waited too long. Putin should have done this in 2014 itself after he took Crimea, but whatever. So we know what Russia's interests are. Russia's interests are that red lines cannot be crossed. Ukraine cannot be a EU nation, cannot be a NATO nation. You cannot have NATO boots on the ground in Ukraine, and Ukraine needs to be a neutral nation. And Ukraine is historically part of Russia, and so on. That's Russia's position. And they have secured their interests by doing the military operation. That's what Putin has done. Ukraine's interest today is to continue to exist in some shape or form. And that's one. Ukraine's interest, first of all, to continue to exist. It's an existential crisis now for Ukraine. Secondly, whatever population they have left, that needs to be safeguarded. The war has chewed up, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of young Ukrainian men, and even older Ukrainian men. That's a demographic disaster that needs to end. Right? This is somebody else's war. It's a proxy war. The Americans are now saying it openly. It's been a proxy war. I have been saying this for 3 years. I was saying this when it was not fashionable to say that. Today, everyone is saying it. It's a proxy war. So, what's the point of being somebody's proxy? And the Biden administration was happy for the war to go on as long as the last Ukrainian was alive. So Ukraine's interests are to continue to exist in some shape or form, to retain some territory, whatever the Russians have not taken thus far, to end the war ceasefire as soon as possible so that no more Ukrainians die, and hopefully to have a proper leader who actually works towards Ukraine's national interest, not somebody else's interest, which means there needs to be a regime change in Kiev. That's Ukraine's interest. But that's not Zelensky's interest. Zelensky's interest is let the war go on. Now, what is the EU's interest in all this? From an EU perspective, European Union perspective, what they should look at is their economies need to do better. The past 3 years, their economies have been kind of devastated. They have not been doing well. The economic growth engine has spluttered and subsided. Many of these economies have gone into recession. From EU's perspective, their interest is that there needs to be a resumption of the supply of cheap energy from Russia to Europe so that the economic growth engine can be revived. And they obviously, from the European perspective, would want assurances from Putin that he will not expand further westwards beyond Ukraine, and so on. So that's Europe's interest. The American interest is that this war should end. We need to stop donating this money for this pointless war. And they want a reconfiguration of their relationship with the EU nations, with the NATO nations and all. And they will do that. And the American interest is also to recuperate as much money as possible from Ukraine, because they spent, like, I don't know, $300-400 billion. So they will try and recuperate that through Ukraine's mineral wealth. So Ukraine is essentially up for sale right now. Its resources, its territories are all going to be divided up. Reminds me to some extent of the end of the Ottoman Empire. I'm talking about what? 1919, 1920, around that time. Roughly, give or take a couple of years. That sort of, the Ottoman Empire was essentially chopped up and parceled out to the various winning allies of the First World War, victorious allies. That sort of thing could happen to Ukraine right now. So, why are the EU nations and leaders trying to verbally support Zelensky? See, I'll tell you why. Trump came to power for the first time in 2016. You remember that. And he had a very Disastrous presidency. He was not able to get anything done, not even that wall that he wanted to build with Mexico, nothing. The entire system was up against him. His own party was up against him. And the entire so-called deep state was very non-republican, or rather democratic in nature. And this is the machinery, deep state machinery, that controls EU and NATO. So each EU, see, these EU leaders, they are not really democratically elected. They don't really work towards the interests of their nations and people. They are allowing in immigration, illegal immigration, and so many issues you have in the EU. So these people, they don't really work towards the national interest. That's not the, they have other interests, and each of these leaders will have a set of handlers, American handlers, who tell them what to do and what not to do, and how to behave, and what things to say and what things you're not supposed to say, and what policies you're supposed to adopt. And many of these policies, most of these policies come from Brussels, which is the headquarters of the European Union, and the boss of the EU, what's her name? Her name is Ursula von der Leyen. She also will have a bunch of handlers. So all these handlers who tell these people what to do are gonna be non-Republican, old-time Democrats, essentially. And they don't like Trump, and that's why the EU leaders also don't like Trump. They are much more comfortable with the Democrats. So there is this tussle going on right now. They are perfectly happy working for the US, but not for Trump. They want to oppose Trump. So that's the tug of war we are seeing right now. But they will not put their money and their lives on the line to prop up Zelensky. They'll simply give him verbal support and so on. And maybe it is they who instigated Zelensky to go to the White House and create this gigantic incident. Yeah, so that's why they're supporting the Ukrainian president. And because they themselves are not really legitimate leaders. Most of these EU people, except a few, are not really legitimate leaders. Maybe Macron is legitimate because France is a quasi sovereign nation, much more sovereign than the other EU nations. Yeah, so that's the deal. Tanay Chandra says, did you ever imagine that Americans and Russians, alongside with North Koreans, Israelis, Belarusians, will vote in the United Nations and will be on the same side? The recent UNSC voting on Ukraine-Russia conflict took everyone by surprise. What should the Indian MEA, Ministry of External Affairs, do according to me? Good question. Let's take a look at the way the voting happened. Let's pull this up. And let me put that on the screen. 1 second. Let's put that on the screen. So this is what happened. Yeah. So this vote for this resolution happened on the 24th of February. Today is the 1st of March. So it happened this Monday. Today is Saturday. And as you can see, a number of nations voted against this resolution, which was a resolution to condemn the Russian invasion, whole-scale invasion and occupation of Ukraine, and that sort of language was used in the resolution. So who voted against? Belarus, Burkina Faso, Burundi, Central African Republic, DPR Korea, which is North Korea, Equatorial Guinea, Eritrea, Haiti, Hungary, Israel. These are all voting against. Mali, Marshall Islands, Nicaragua, Niger, Palau, Russian Federation, which is Putin, Sudan, and the United States. They all voted against. So the US was joined in opposing this resolution by Russia, by Israel, and North Korea. And India and China and a large number of other nations abstained. They stayed out of this matter. They said this is none of our business. Interesting, isn't it? So who would have thought, right, like you say, that the US will side with with North Korea and Russia, along with Israel and Belarus, etc., in the United Nations? Interesting, isn't it? One could not have imagined this during the Biden presidency. But this is the Trump presidency, and Trump wants to end the war and move forward. Uh, and that's why so the resolution, I think, called for Russia returning all the territories to Ukraine. Obviously that's not going to happen, right? Trump wants to end the war. He wants to end the war the way it is, right, the way the situation is right now. uh, so it did not really take me by surprise, even though overall it's surprising that the US and Russia and North Korea and Israel, etc., they vote together in opposition to a certain United Nations resolution, and the EU nations, UK, etc., they vote in favor. It's so strange, but yeah, overall it's not surprising. But from a historical perspective, it's something that's really unusual. Uh, it's because Trump wants to end the war, and he knows the only way to end the war is to give Putin the territorial gains he has already acquired. He's not going to give it up. We all know he's not going to give it up. He can actually take more if he wants, if he feels like. But he probably only wants the Russian-speaking regions, and he will have a bunch of other demands, which most likely Trump will accept. So it's a victory for Russia. That's essentially what it is. Now, the last part of the question is, what should the Indian Ministry of External Affairs do? Nothing. We have been on the right side of diplomacy. We have been doing the right things. I must genuinely, truly commend India's position on this matter the past 3 years. India has taken all the right decisions, made all the right choices. India is going to end up on the right side of history when it comes to this. The beginning, everybody was condemning India, especially in the West, that India will be on the wrong side of history, blah blah blah. But look, had India participated in the sanctions against Russia, what would we look like today? Like idiots, right? So everything we have done is right. The Ministry of External Affairs is right to abstain in these votes. This is none of our business. We don't want to take sides in this. We urge peace. We call upon everybody to end the war, to have a ceasefire as soon as possible. We want peace again, and that's what we have been consistently saying since the 22nd of February 2022. So great going, very good, amazing performance, amazing job. Abhimanyu and Samana Satish say, what's happening between the EU and the US? We all know what happened between Trump and Zelensky, but if the EU is a vassal of the US, then why are they opposing the President of the United States? Is the EU trying to break free from US dominance? You were right when you told us that it is Russia that's winning the war. Trump doesn't want this war to continue. He excluded Europe from peace talks. But is the EU trying to shield Ukraine, or is it powerful enough to stand against the US? And what's the future of Ukraine? Right, so there is friction between the EU and the United States. I mean, the EU, I've always said this, and it still stands true, that the real power in Europe, there are two major powers in Europe. In the east, you have Russia. In the west, you have the US. The real power in Western Europe is the US. It's not EU or the NATO or NATO. And the US physically militarily occupies a number of European nations, including the UK, including Germany, including Italy. And the US has nuclear weapons. There are more nations. I just gave you a few. The US has nuclear weapons installed in various EU nations. So the US is the real military force and economic power in Western Europe. Now, right now, what you're seeing is politics. Okay, all these EU leaders, they have a close affinity with the Democrats, the Democratic Party in the US, and they don't like Trump, and that's the cause of the friction. And Trump wants the EU nations to spend more money towards the upkeep of NATO, a significantly higher percentage of their GDP towards NATO should be given by the EU nation, by the NATO nations, and so on. There are a number of sticking points in the relationship, and that's why these nations, these leaders, don't like Donald Trump, and they want to stick it to him essentially by supporting Zelensky in this matter. It's not going to be easy for Trump to get these people in line. But at the end of the day, he's the US president and he's got the full might of the US establishment behind him this time. He has certain things he needs to do at home also. Like, for example, he wanted to, his administration wanted to release the Epstein files, but they were given redacted documents and not the full set of evidence, right? The FBI is not cooperating. So there are still holdovers from the ancien regime, the old regime of Biden, the Democrats, who generally have been very deeply in power in the establishment. And right now, Trump has to do a cleanup job. So it's going to be difficult for people like Kash Patel, who is the director of the FBI, for people like Tulsi Gabbard, who is the overall boss of the intelligence agencies. Uh, they have been put in this position that you are the captain of the ship, but the entire significant portion of the crew is against them. So it's a period of transition. It's going to take time for them to truly take the reins of power. It's going to be a period of time. So even with the EU leaders, Trump and his Secretary of State and the overall foreign State Department is going to have to work on them. So yeah, that's what's happening between the EU and the US. Some analysts are claiming the US is withdrawing from Europe and becoming more insular and so on. I would not be so hasty in making that claim. No superpower, no empire gives up its leverage so easily. But things are afloat right now in the world. A lot is changing, especially from a technological perspective. The US has its hand on super weapons, super technologies that nobody knows about. It's all behind closed doors. I'm talking about AI, obviously. AI is super intelligence, right? I'm pretty sure they've achieved ASI, artificial super intelligence. So they don't need to, physically control so much of the planet right now. And so things are changing. We'll see how it goes. But yeah, that's the situation. So these EU leaders, they want this war to be prolonged. They want the war to continue so that they remain relevant. But it's going to destroy the economy of Europe in the long run. So all these leaders are problematic. I mean, they don't really have the best interests of their people and their countries in mind. Otherwise, they would not have brought in so many illegal immigrants and allowed the economy to deteriorate so badly. And the UK would not have allowed all those Pakistani grooming gangs to violate their daughters and so on. These leaders don't really care about their people. The EU is a scam, essentially. So that's the deal right now. Indian stock picker says it's very obvious that Ukraine is not getting a good deal over recent interactions between Trump, Zelensky, and Putin. If Mr. Zelensky deals directly with Mr. Putin, is there a chance for Ukraine to be in a better position than where it is now? I mean, no further gains for the US. At least they'll have all resources left to themselves, and Ukraine remains unexploited further. Look, Ukraine is in no position to dictate what kind of deal it gets. Please understand that. Let me bring a tweet of Mr. Trump to your attention. Okay. Where can I find that tweet? Okay, here it is. I'm going to put that on the screen briefly. Here we are. Shares. Okay. Here is the tweet by Mr. Donald Trump. It's a tweet from 2013. And this is what he said. Remember the golden rule of negotiating. He who has the gold makes the rules. This is wisdom. These are words of wisdom by Mr. Donald Trump. He who has the gold makes the rules. Now, does Ukraine have the gold? Ukraine has zero leverage of any kind. And that's why Ukraine is in no position to decide what kind of deal it gets. Obviously, it's going to get a poor deal. It's a helpless nation. Their president is apparently a drug addict who thinks he can go and be rude with everybody in the world. He's been rude with lots of EU leaders. He's been rude with Mr. Modi when Mr. Modi visited Ukraine. And Mr. Putin can't stand Zelensky. The two have history. They've met many times. Mr. Zelensky has been caught on camera mocking and laughing at Mr. Putin when Mr. Putin was giving a speech. Um, so there's no question of Mr. Zelensky having the option of dealing at this point directly with Mr. Putin. No way that's going to happen. And there's no way Mr. Zelensky has now the option of dealing with Mr. Trump either, because Mr. Trump can't stand him now. Look at that. The two men who are in a position to determine the fate of his nation and his own life, he has completely antagonized them. So now Ukraine's fate will be decided without the involvement, even nominal, of Mr. Zelensky. He can protest all he wants, but what's going to happen is going to happen. What happens to Mr. Zelensky long term, we don't know. I in previous episodes would have said that maybe there's a possibility that Mr. Zelensky will take his illicit billions of dollars that he has siphoned off, and he may go and live in California or something. That option is off the table now. The US no longer will welcome Mr. Zelensky. So eventually, when things settle down and Mr. Zelensky is no longer in power, which is going to happen sooner rather than later, regime change, what's going to happen to Mr. Zelensky? Will any EU nation give him asylum? We'll see about that. So, yeah, Ukraine gets a bad deal because it's a nation that's helpless and non-sovereign. It's not a sovereign nation. So the two sovereign powers will decide what happens to Ukraine. Ukraine is going to be partitioned. And after the partitioning is determined, the parameters of the partitioning and the lines on the map are drawn, there's going to be a regime change in Kiev. Let me tell you this today. There's going to be regime change in Kiev. And Mr. Zelensky is in no position to prevent that from happening. And he'll be very lucky, Mr. Zelensky, if he gets asylum in some nation and can make his way there safely. So, yeah, that is the deal. Ukraine is going to lose a lot, unfortunately, because of the choices made by quislings like Zelensky. Okay, Pranay Paul says, with Trump now aligning with Russia in the name of peace, quotation marks, is it genuine or is this just classic US strategy, which proves Mr. Kissinger right that to be an enemy of the US is dangerous, but to be a friend is fatal? Well, is Mr. Trump aligning with Russia in the name of peace? No. Mr. Trump is trying to fulfill the promise he made to his voters that he will end the war. And it's just the way it is, that the only way to end the war is to end the war with the lines of the map essentially where they are, which means Russia gets what it wants. If Mr. Trump does not give Mr. Putin what Mr. Putin has always sought from day one of the war, then the war will continue, and then Mr. Putin may actually roll over Ukraine and take more than half of Ukraine, or who knows, the whole of it. Do you want that? The Russian military has grown stronger the past 3 years. Historically, if you know Russian history, they never start a war well. They initially are caught kind of unprepared, even if they have started the hostilities. And the first few months they don't do really well, but then they slowly start getting better and better. This is what history tells us. And today Russia's military is a lean, mean fighting machine. Their entire economy is now a war economy. Their production lines are pushing out arms, ammunitions, everything. They are in great shape. And there's no European nation that can withstand the might of the Russian military right now. And I don't think Mr. Putin has any ambitions of taking any nation outside of Ukraine, west of Ukraine. I don't think he has any such dreams or ambitions. He's not harboring any such ambitions. So the best way to have peace today is to let Russia win this war and achieve their objectives. And in exchange, you get guarantees from Russia that Russia will not expand westwards. And then you can have some kind of deal that you will have peacekeepers in Ukraine, in the non-Russian part of Ukraine, and a neutral regime, which means Zelensky goes. and some other safeguards will be put in place by NATO in the NATO nations west of Ukraine. That sort of arrangement will have to be negotiated and agreed between the US and Russia. Trump is not doing this in the name of peace. He's not aligning with Russia. He's ending the war, which is good for the world. Peace is what everyone wants. Mr. Modi has been saying this since 2022. This is not a time for war. We need peace. So finally, we are going to have that. So this is a genuine thing he's doing. He's not doing it because he loves Russia and loves Putin or is a great fan of Putin. He does respect Putin, obviously. A world leader would be stupid not to respect Putin, right? So now coming to Mr. Kissinger's quote, the late Mr. Kissinger did say that to be an enemy of the US is dangerous, but to be a friend is fatal. Generally, when he was referring to friends, he was talking about vassals. Saddam Hussein was one of those vassals, one of those friends. Muammar Gaddafi in the past, to some extent. Osama bin Laden fought on behalf of the US in Afghanistan. We know what happened to all these gentlemen. So Zelensky is in that league. So your quote is appropriate, it's apt, but it's apt for Ukraine and for Zelensky. Zelensky has been, you could say, on the receiving end of US friendship. And Ukraine as a nation has been the past 3 years on the receiving end of US friendship. And now there's going to be a price to pay. You're going to lose your territory, about 20% roughly, give or take, of Ukrainian territory. And Ukraine will lose its natural mineral wealth. And we'll see what else it loses. So yeah, it's all kind of fatal for Ukraine. And for Zelensky, who knows? We'll see what happens, what fate has in store for Zelensky. McLevin says, what was the point of public humiliation of Zelensky? Is this the new politics? Was Trump planning to do the same with Prime Minister Modi? What was the point of public humiliation of Mr. Zelensky? Is this new politics? Trump did not go into the press conference in the Oval Office with the aim or objective of humiliating Mr. Zelensky. If you watch a 3-minute clip or a 5-minute clip, you will get the feeling that Zelensky was brought in there so that he could be humiliated. You will get the sense that he was ambushed and he had no idea what happened. He was caught unawares. But if you take the time to watch the 50-minute video from beginning to end, you will see it was never the objective. You will see Mr. Trump in the beginning says at least a couple of times, at least twice, that it is a great honor to have Mr. Zelensky here. He's very polite, he's very warm, he's very welcoming. It's only about, 40 minutes into the interaction that Zelensky, he pushes too many wrong buttons, and then all hell breaks loose. Zelensky brought this on himself. Zelensky was looking for a fight. He was like a drunk man going to a bar looking for a fight. Who do I fight? I want to fight someone. That's the kind of attitude he has. Look at his body language, closed off like a surly teenager, like this, disrespectful, rude, shrugging his shoulders, rolling his eyes like that when JD Vance or Trump are speaking. Extremely disrespectful. This was not a public humiliation. Zelensky asked for it. You don't disrespect the most powerful man in the world. You don't disrespect the office of the US president. You don't do this in the Oval Office. Have some sense of courtesy. Have some sense of shame. You don't disrespect your hosts. It's basic manners. Basic courtesy. Looks like he doesn't even have that, Zelensky. So please don't blame Trump for what happened to Zelensky. Zelensky brought this upon himself. They were supposed to sign that mineral wealth deal after this. So see, the problem is when we watch a 3-minute or 5-minute clip, we may not understand the full context of what happened. Okay, so I would recommend, please go ahead, whoever has this impression that Zelensky was humiliated and he was ambushed and so on, I would recommend to all of you who think that way to watch the entire roughly 50-minute interaction. It's available wherever on social media. And then you will see that Zelensky is the person who caused this. It wasn't Trump who did this, or Vance. Zelensky went in looking for a fight, and eventually, you know, Trump Trump tried to, let it go so many times. He stayed quiet, but eventually it was too much. I think Trump lost it when Zelensky started accusing JD Vance of raising his voice. If you're going to talk with a loud voice, it's not going to make you right. You don't insult your hosts like that. So please watch the whole thing. Then you will understand what really happened. And was Trump planning to do the same with PM Modi? Absolutely not. Mighty Modak says, what's with the Trump and Zelensky drama? After seeing that the compliment from Trump 2.0 about Modi being a better and tougher negotiator seems awesome. What's going to happen to Zelensky now? I have a bad feeling about his future. Okay, forget about Zelensky's future. Let's talk about Trump and Modi. Mr. Modi was there I don't know, this month, I think, yeah. Last month, February. Not a long time ago, I think a couple of weeks ago, Mr. Modi was there in Washington, D.C., the same old office. And you can see the difference in body language and warmth, etc., when Mr. Trump and Mr. Modi were in the Oval Office and the interaction happened there. Mr. Trump was so respectful towards Mr. Modi, and Mr. Modi likewise was similarly respectful towards Mr. Trump. You could see that there is a sense of camaraderie, a sense of friendship between the two leaders, and you could see that negotiations have happened, and they must have been tough negotiations, but both sides seem to be reasonably happy and satisfied. Neither of the sides, you could see from the body language and expressions and all, neither side felt like they had been taken advantage of unduly. So it was a very positive media interaction when Mr. Modi was there with Mr. Trump. Now, I can assure you that when the cameras are rolling, everybody was on their best behavior. You were very courteous, you were very diplomatic. And when you're negotiating behind closed doors, it's a whole different world. And none of those niceties apply. There's going to be arm twisting, there's going to be bullying, all that. And it's possible those things may have happened during the interaction between Mr. Trump and Mr. Modi behind closed doors. Right? But clearly, India did not come out as a very big loser from that interaction. India will work on the tariffs issue. We will lower tariffs. Some of these tariffs have already been lowered and all. So, see, when you go to Washington, D.C. as a leader, and you're meeting with Mr. Trump, you have to understand he is more powerful than you. He has way more leverage than you. So you have to do your homework. What does Trump want? What does Mr. Trump want from this relationship between, if you're the Prime Minister of India, what does Mr. Trump want from the US-India relationship? What does he seek from Mr. Modi during this visit? Mr. Trump is a great negotiator. And Mr. Trump always wants wins for the US. So you have to go in there prepared to give Mr. Trump some wins that he can show to the public, US public, that see, I won. But you have to do it in such a way that you don't lose as a consequence. It has to be a win-win thing. It has to be balanced. So you really need to do your homework, and you have to give Mr. Trump wins. You have to make him feel happy, and then he's going to help you out as well. He's a reasonably fair man. Unless you're stupid and you give everything up, you have to be a tough negotiator, but you have to be courteous. You have to give Mr. Trump wins and so on. It's not easy. Diplomacy isn't easy. It's really difficult. And only the tough survive in that. So clearly, Mr. Modi has done a great job. It's safeguarding our national interests when it comes to the negotiations and diplomacy with the US, with Mr. Trump. That cannot be denied. So that's awesome. Absolutely awesome. So yeah, aren't we lucky? We have that. We have Mr. Modi. Life is meaningful says, Mr. Putin has invited Trump, Modi, and Mr. Xi Jinping for the May victory parade in Moscow. Is there any possibility for a joint statement of the top 4 nations in the world? I've been saying for such a long time, there are 4 nations. There are only 4 nations in the world that are genuinely sovereign, which is the US, Russia, India, and China. Well, there you have it. Mr. Putin invites the other 3. So there you have it. He hasn't invited Mr. Macron of France or any other nation. Only these three: Trump, Modi, and Xi, which tells you there are only four genuinely sovereign nations in the world. Um, Now, we'll see whether these invitations will be accepted. Mr. Trump has said that he's going to meet with Mr. Putin and resolve the whole matter. Um, so maybe Mr. Trump will go to Moscow, or maybe Mr. Putin comes to Washington, whichever way it works, or maybe a third location. We'll see about that. But things are going back on the right track, and the hostility seems to be ending between the US and Russia. And now Mr. Putin, obviously, he wants to see. He's been isolated. Russia has been isolated for the past three plus years. So it's a good opportunity for Russia to show the world that it's back. Things are back to normal, and the big world leaders can all come together and meet with him in Moscow for this historical thing, the May victory parade. So we'll see. Will Mr. Trump accept this? Will Mr. Modi accept this? Will Mr. Xi accept it? And there's going to be a lot of considerations in that, but it would be great to see these four leaders together in Moscow. Right, the U.S.-China relationship is a whole different beast. That also we have to consider that, and lots of parameters and variables in that as well. So we'll see. And if, let's say Mr. Trump or let's say Mr. Trump hypothetically decides not to come, then should Mr. Modi go, and should Mr. Xi also go, or will it offend Mr. Trump if there's all kinds of considerations. So I think there's going to be consultations between Mr. Modi and Mr. Trump, and Mr. Modi and Mr. Xi, and Mr. Trump and Mr. Xi, and so on and so forth. It's going to be complicated, but it will be nice to see all four leaders in Moscow for this event. And if all four are there, there could be some kind of joint statement, definitely. And Mr. Trump will want, I'm sure, at least half of the joint statement, because status, he's Mr. Number One, the most powerful man in the world. So yes, all that also is taken into consideration. So it'll be great if this actually happens. It'll be great. Wonderful. Okay, Drenzen Smith says, I live in Australia, and I'm worried about recent change in global politics. Trump is trying to improve and normalize relations with dictator Putin, and it seems like he also wants to work with China, and he thinks that US is some kind of a company and he's the CEO of it, and that his company is in a state of loss right now. That China regularly violates Australian waters. What steps should Australia take in this rapid changing of the world order? Right. So yeah, Putin is a dictator. Fine. Let's do away with the niceties and all that. Sure, he's a dictator. So is Mr. Xi. Mr. Xi is also a dictator, right? He's kind of the emperor of China. And Mr. Putin is kind of the Tsar of Russia. Yeah. And Trump thinks that the US is some kind of a company and he's the CEO of it. Well, that's typically how a proactive president has historically been. And if you want to really take away all the niceties, then Australia is like a US owned corporation. Okay, you have permanent US military bases in Australia. You always have US troops on Australian soil, and Australia is essentially a US protectorate. Until the 1940s, the UK was in charge of Australia's protection, essentially. And then the UK became a second-rate world power because of the events of the 1940s, the World War, and so on. And then the US assumed the role of the protector and guardian of Australia. Now, if you look at the history, the US, Canada, it's the five Anglosphere nations, right? So culturally, linguistically, ethnically, very similar nations. So if you look at the world from a very realistic, hard-nosed perspective, there is one major empire in the world, which is the US empire. It's nothing but a continuation of the British Empire. In 1944-45, the capital of the empire moved from London, UK, to Washington, DC. That's all that happened. And it's the same entity that continues to rule the world. And Australia is a component of that. Australia is like a US-owned corporation. And so the US is in charge of Australia's security. And in the 40s, there was the worry in Australia that the Japanese would invade. And the US had to step in and ensure this doesn't happen. And eventually, we know the history. And today, there is a concern about China in Australia. So, and there's also concerns in Australia that Australia is deeply infiltrated by the Chinese, in various ways. So, yeah, all these issues are there. So, first of all, let's look at the world from a very realistic, pragmatic, hard nosed perspective. Putin is a dictator. She is a dictator. The US is an empire. Trump is the current emperor, CEO of the US, which seems to consider to be a company, sure. And to take it further, Australia is a US possession, a US owned corporation. The Prime Minister of Australia is not really a person who's genuinely in power. He does whatever the US wants him to do. He will never take any action that will be detrimental to US interests. And if he does, then he won't stay in power too long. So that's the situation in the world. But you know what? It doesn't matter because the people are reasonably prosperous. You have reasonable amounts of freedom, unless there's a lockdown or whatever, but that's how it goes. The Western world is one giant police state, which is the truth. Ask any politician from the EU, for example, off the record, they'll admit the Western world is a police state. But that's how it is. So now the question is, what does Australia do in this rapidly changing world order? What steps should Australia take to safeguard its interests, its national interests? What should Australia do? So first of all, Australia needs US protection, and you need to safeguard your very large coastline and your territorial waters. The Chinese Navy is a big threat now, right? We know that they have the largest navy in terms of numbers in the world. Maybe not the most powerful navy, but definitely the largest navy, the most number of warships in the world. And I'm not sure how many missiles they can deploy, but I'm sure it's a sizable number of missiles. So that's a big area of concern for Australia. The Chinese have multiple aircraft carriers now. So so Australia needs US protection. You need American military bases on your territory. You need interoperability with the US military, which you have. Yes. Maybe another thing you can do is have US nuclear weapons on your soil. I mean, in the 20th century, you did allow the Americans to test at least one nuclear weapon on Australian soil, didn't you? So you need that. And so essentially you need US help to ward off the China threat. And the Chinese obviously are currently facing lots of issues with the US. Trump started the trade war during his first presidency, and there was a historical reversal of US policy towards China. And now the two nations are, well, adversaries in all domains, essentially, in technology, in the military domain, in the naval domain, in space, in diplomacy, in everything, in economics, in trade, everything. They're adversaries. So you need the US on your side. The Chinese, nobody talks about China's rise anymore. China's peaceful rise, which was not very peaceful. It was kind of scary, very threatening. But now they've toned it down. But the threat remains from your perspective. So you need the US on your side. Democracy and all, it's okay. And you need to bolster your military as well. So you need your own submarines. You have this AUKUS deal. You're going to have a bunch of nuclear submarines, which will technically be yours, but those will be operated by Americans from Australian ports. Well, whatever, it's okay as long as it keeps you safe. So that's what you need to do. Essentially, to make a long story short, you need to put all your eggs in the US basket. And you're part of the Quad as well, which means you're gonna have interoperability with the with the Americans, the Japanese, and to some extent us, the Indians. And obviously, the Quad is focused around China, the Chinese threat. So yeah, you need to participate in all of this and be friends with all like-minded nations, all nations that are scared of China, including us. China is scary, believe it. Believe me. So that's what you need to do. Right. Next question. Why will the US give $400 million to Pakistan? Trump announced, Harsha Warrior says, Trump announced $400 million aid or whatever to Pakistan. What's your take on this? It reminds me of your saying on previous live session, nothing changes for India, everything is in its place. Yeah, so there have been people, you know, there's been this sentiment in India that when Trump comes to power, everything will change and everything will be better for India. Trump will what bring Sheikh Hasina back to power in East Pakistan and so on. Things don't change that way. If the US has leverage over you, they will never give it up. So on the 26th of February this year, today is the 1st of March. I'm talking about 26th of February, which is Wednesday. Today is Saturday. This Wednesday, just 3 days ago, on the 26th of February, which is the anniversary of the Balakot airstrike. On that day, Trump announced that he's releasing 400 million or whatever dollars as aid to Pakistan to refurbish or maintain for maintenance of their F-16 fighter planes, but strictly for the purpose of countering terrorism. How do you use fighter planes to counter terrorism? It's like using a machine gun to shoot mosquitoes. Yeah, using F-16s to target terrorists is like using a machine gun to target mosquitoes. So Trump is releasing a certain amount of money to Pakistan so that they can do maintenance or whatever on their F-16 fleet. So obviously, the Pakistanis, why do they have F-16s? To target India. We all know that, right? It's not for terrorists. It's for India. So why is Trump doing this? It's obviously he's placing pressure on India. He's reminding India that I have all kinds of leverage over you. This is just a reminder. $400 million is not a really big amount of money, actually. But he's reminding India, I have so many ways of pressurizing you, on applying pressure and leverage over you. You better do what I want. It's a friendly reminder, essentially. Uh, so they are not. So Trump is not going to bring Sheikh Hasina back to power. He's not going to undo the regime change that happened in East Pakistan, Bangladesh, and he will prop up the West Pakistan vassal regime as well. There are some people on Twitter who claim that Pakistan is a sovereign nation and not a vassal of the US. I mean, what delusional world are you living in? The US effected a regime change in Pakistan in the year 2022. They ousted Imran Khan, who was pro-China, and they brought in whoever is the current prime minister of Pakistan. And now Pakistan is a full-fledged US vassal state. And the US will not give up that leverage. Otherwise, Pakistan will go back to another daddy. See, the Pakistani military always needs a big daddy somewhere. It's either China or the US. Historically, it's been the US, then China for a decade or so, after the US lost interest, and now it's the US again. So the US owns Pakistan and Pakistan's government and military. Why will they give up that leverage? So it's not a big setback. It's not a big issue for India-US ties, but yeah, it's another reminder from Trump and from the US that you guys stay in your lane, don't get off reservation. Remember who you are. Remember, we have all kinds of leverage over you. So behave. We have these issues and you need to give us what we want. Lower the tariffs, do this, do that, whatever. So that's how the game is played. It's a game of leverage. Prakhar Gupta says, please explain the whole recent situation developing between the US, Russia, Ukraine regarding peace deals. Why has the US suddenly started supporting its biggest rival, Russia? Is Trump going to end his rivalry and take US-Russia relationship to the pre-Cold War era? He's also bashing Zelenskyy for starting the war and forcing him to sign the minerals deal. What's your take on this entire issue? If the US and Russia become allies now, how will it affect global geopolitics and especially Bharat? To recap everything that's happening, Trump wants to end this wasteful war. He understands and he realizes that Russia has the upper hand, and there's nothing the Americans or NATO or Europe can do to undo the gains Russia and Putin have acquired in Ukraine. There's no way the Russians will tolerate Ukraine becoming a member of NATO, and there's no way they will tolerate any crossing of the red lines. So this war, the Americans thus far have already spent about $300-400 billion, tremendous amount of money. They are leaking money, they are bleeding money. It's enough. This is a pointless war. It's damaging the U.S. economy, draining U.S. money. So Trump wants to end this. So that's why the war is now in the end game phase. Trump and Putin and their minions will get together, hammer out the parameters of the deal, and then there's going to be ceasefire, which will involve Putin getting everything he wants, which is a victory. Which is a victory for Russia in the war. He will keep the territory he has gained. He will ensure that Ukraine remains neutral. Ukraine never becomes a member of NATO. He will ensure that there's denazification and demilitarization of Ukraine, which means that there's going to be peacekeepers of some kind in Ukraine, but the Ukraine military has to put down its weapons. He has already decimated the Azov regiment, which means to a large extent Ukraine is denazified. At least he can tell his people that it's done. And he's going to ensure that Zelenskyy is ousted. There's a regime change. So Putin gets everything he wants. Everything he wanted on February 2022, he will get all of that. And it's not a big loss for the US. It's actually good that the war ends. So Trump is not supporting his biggest rival. The US is not supporting his biggest rival. They're just ending the war. And you have to understand another thing. There's a China factor here. So the war has pushed Russia into a very close embrace with China. And from the US perspective, China is a very big rival and a very big concern for the US, especially China's technological growth, technological advances in various fields, including AI, including all kinds of other stuff. So, and China is the second largest economy in the world. They have their issues and so on, but China is a very big concern for the US, and China's expanding naval strength, military strength. All of this is a big concern for the US. So the US would like to kind of take Russia out of this tight embrace with China. How do you do that? First of all, you end the war, give Putin what he wants. Secondly, you ease the sanctions. So if you ease the sanctions, then you can. The sanctions had decoupled Russia, the Russian economy, from the Western economy. So now you open up those ties again. And of course, you have to remember that everything was not shut down. There is this, if you go to any airport, major airport, then you will see that there is an airline called Aeroflot, Russian airline. Their planes are mostly Western planes, Boeings and Airbuses. And so those spares and supplies, the supply of that still continued during the war. So now, everything was not shut down, but Russia's banking system, economic system was decoupled from SWIFT and so on. So that may happen again. So if Russia gets access to the Western economy again, then their tremendous dependence on China will not be such a big factor anymore, and Russia will be able to kind of decouple to some extent from China. Of course, they will not completely give that up. Russia also understands that China is a valuable partner to have, so is India. So what the US wants to do is they want to take Russia out of its tight embrace from China. They want to make China feel more isolated so that they can eventually, the big agenda is to rein in China, to clamp down on China and ensure that China doesn't become a great power or a potential superpower in the future. That's the big objective. Trump's big game is China. It's not Russia. Russia can be dealt with by ending the war, which will happen soon. So that's actually what's happening. Zelenskyy is irrelevant. They're going to get rid of him at the earliest. So Trump is ending the hostility, etc., with Russia. He's going to make life easier for Russia. He will probably ease a lot of sanctions, bring Russia back into the fold of the global economy. And then he's going to focus on China. And in that, he's going to need India as well. So the US and Russia don't become allies. all that happens is that the hostility ends, and they are no longer enemies. It doesn't mean that they become allies. Just because they have ended the war, they're ending the war, and they are no longer enemies. It doesn't mean that they have become allies. Please understand the distinction. Um, so yeah, once this happens, once the war ends, once there's a ceasefire and Putin gets what he wants, and Zelensky is out, and so on and so forth, all of that stuff, then the war has ended. They are no longer enemies. Then what happens then is Trump and the US start focusing on China. And there's going to be consequences coming out of that, all kinds of first order, second order consequences. And it's going to involve India to some extent, maybe to a large extent, because the Americans will want India on their side. They're going to tell us, you're either with us or against us. Then we have to pick a side. But at least we don't have to go against Russia. Right? The past, let's say, a year or so, there have been attempts, serious, concerted attempts by India and China to bring down the hostility that started with the Galwan clash 2020, and that succeeded to a significant extent. Of course, we haven't demarcated the boundary, the India-Tibet border, which is the main bone of contention. But the temperature and hostility has come down. The two armies are no longer staring eyeball to eyeball to a large extent, and patrolling is now happening in a peaceful manner, and so on. So there is this area, this climate of improving relations between India and China, and the US may not like that very much. So that is where it could affect India. That's where it could affect Bharat. It could place us in a position where we have to make a choice. Either we want friendly relations with China, or we have to end all that and become kind of a US tool in its toolkit of containing and encircling China. So that is what could be coming up for us in the next 3-4 years. Okay, Nastya Makinov, whatever, says, why has the EU President Ursula von der Leyen, why has she visited India? What are her intentions? How will India benefit from the EU? What are India's opportunities vis-a-vis the EU? Will European working travel visas become easy for Indian citizens? What are my views? Okay, so the visit has just happened, and instead of me trying and remember what all happened, let me put out this report on the screen and we will read it together. It's by this reporter journalist called Siddhant Sibal, and he has listed all the activities. This tweet is from yesterday, so it's very recent. So let's see what all has happened. So let's read. So it's very rare for EU president, along with 22 commissioners, cabinet ministers, to travel bilaterally to any country in such a format. This visit shows how Brussels is keen to firm up ties with India. So let's find out what are the outcomes of this visit. Right? Let's find out the outcomes. India and EU free trade agreement. Both leaders gave a big political push for the conclusion of the free trade agreement, which has been apparently languishing for decades. So we are hoping to conclude the free trade agreement by the end of this year. This comes as Trump tariff worries remain a key concern for India as well as for the EU. And the EU wants a reduction of tariffs, especially cars and wines. Not only FTA, but focus on conclusion of agreement on investment protection and geographical indications by year end discussed. Clear political push by top Indian and European leaders for the free trade agreement. 10th round of FTA talks will take place in Brussels next month. Diversification and de-risking, call for strengthening supply chain resilience, basically reducing dependencies on China, which everybody will welcome. Trusted and secure value chain is our common priority, which is what PM Modi has said. And the EU Commission President said we need to build robust and diverse supply chains. There is talk of climate, joint research on EV batteries, marine plastics, green hydrogen, offshore wind business summit has been planned. EU imposed tariffs on EV batteries from China, which is a big global share to counter government unfair subsidies. Strategic technology, deepening cooperation in semiconductors, AI, 6G, and so on. TTC is a key pillar of India EU ties, launched in 23 and so on. There's a joint statement, Green Connect, green energy, green hydrogen, some symbolic things like traveling in a hydrogen powered bus. And connectivity, the IMEC is interesting. India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor, IMEC corridor was discussed at great length. Both leaders mentioned it. So it's expected to make the rail link is expected to make trade between India and Europe 40% faster. Okay, let's see what happens with that. Then there's defense, security and defense partnership. The EU is looking for such a partnership with India on the lines of what the EU has with Japan, South Korea. Um India has shown interest in joining EU's permanent structured cooperation. PESCO, more maritime exercises, new space dialogue, security of information agreement, counter-terrorism operations, cross-border terrorism about Pakistan, cybersecurity, marine security, and so many other issues. So many other issues. Looks like a very substantial thing. I will not go through the whole thing, but you get the point. It's been a very substantial um, visit, and lots of substantial things were discussed. And let's see how what the outcomes and actual tangible measurables are of this. But looks like a good visit. Looks like a productive visit. So the intentions are that both India and the EU as an economic bloc need to work together in a mutually beneficial way, win-win way. We can do all this stuff together, and there's lots of opportunities for us over here. I did not see anything about visas, travel visas. It would be good for Indian citizens if it becomes easier to travel to the EU. Right now, there's a very long, tedious, cumbersome visa process. You have to give, I hear, a bajillion documents to get an EU visa. Maybe we can talk about that. I mean, our leaders can talk with the EU leaders about that and make the process easier. It would be nice. But I did not see anything about visas in what I just read. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But overall, it seems to be good, and something that we should all welcome. Okay, life is meaningful says, what are the biggest delusions that people of India live in, according to me? What are the biggest delusions that Indians have? India's biggest delusions. That's an interesting question. Um, there's a lot of delusions that Indians labor under. No question about it. What are the biggest ones? Our national slogan is Satyamev Jayate. Truth always prevails. That's a delusion. Truth prevails only if it is backed up by strength. Do you understand that? And if you look at Indian politicians and everything, do you see them following this adage of Satyamev Jayate? I'm not talking about all politicians. There are some good politicians, no doubt, in India. Some really great politicians. But if you look at the majority of politicians, you may see that Satyamev Jayate doesn't apply there, right? So the one big delusion is Satyamev Jayate, that we Indians believe that truth always prevails. No, sir. No, ma'am. Strength prevails, not truth. So for truth to prevail, it needs to be backed up by strength, hard power. Okay, that's one delusion. Another delusion is uh, the lots of Indians believe that non-violence won us our independence. Right? We became independent. We won our independence through non-violence. That's a delusion. We are still colonized because we got this transfer of power through non-violence, which ensured that the British were able to handpick their successors who they would hand power to in India. And that's why India is still deeply, deeply colonized, and we have so many issues. Had India won its independence through violence, then we would have a completely different system today. So non-violence did not win us independence. What it ensured is that we remain colonized and nothing changes. The entire system of governance and the entire governance machinery, the entire education system, everything is still British and still colonial. Non-violence did not win us any independence. Another thing people ask is, when faced with some geopolitical choice, they ask, what would Gandhi do? What would Mr. Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi do? What we should actually ask ourselves is, what would Kali do? Not what would Mr. Gandhi do? What would Kali do? Goddess Kali. All your gods, they wield weapons, deadly weapons, bloody weapons, right? So don't ask yourself what would Mr. Gandhi do. Ask yourself what would Kali do, or your favorite god or goddess do. Understand that we are sovereign as a nation, not because we are non-violent, but because we have nuclear weapons and the means to deliver those nuclear weapons. That's why we are sovereign. So please, enough of this delusion of non-violence. And there is Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. Vasudha Eva Kutumbakam. The world is one family. If you read the Jataka tales, you will see that the story that has this slogan, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam, that story is a cautionary tale. And the moral of that story is that the world is not one family. It's a cautionary tale, Vasudhaiva Kutumbakam. So stop believing the world is one family. The world is not one family. Then there is this delusion Indians have about India's soft power. Indians are obsessed with soft power. That's a delusion. Soft power doesn't exist unless you have hard power. Soft power is, you will be respected as a nation only if you have hard power, and then people will value your soft power. But if you are a poor, miserable, third world country, incapable of defending itself, no matter how great your culture is, nobody will value you. So soft power only exists if you have sufficient hard power. That's another delusion Indians labor under. Then there is this delusion in India that unilateral concessions will win you friends. What are examples of unilateral concessions? The partition of India. We gave away our ancestral lands. That was a unilateral concession. What did we get in exchange? We got two enemies on our east and west flanks, right? And the Kashmir issue and all that. Unilaterally giving away your territory, what did it bring us? Any peace? It did not bring us any peace. Another example of a unilateral concession is giving up Tibet to China. Tibet was historically our protectorate for the best part of 2000 years. It was part of the Indosphere of our extended cultural zone of influence. And Mr. Nehru gave it away, handed it away to China on a platter in the 1950s. Unilateral concession. Here, take it. Now we can be friends. You sure? Yeah? Are we friends today? There are so many other things. In the 2000s, unfortunate but true, Prime Minister Vajpayee unilaterally recognized Tibet as a part of China. Until then, India had not recognized Tibet as a part of China. Mr. Vajpayee unilaterally did this. It was a unilateral concession. Okay, we recognize Tibet as a part of China. Now let's be friends. So he must have thought that we'll immediately become friends. But what immediately happened is that China then laid claim on Arunachal Pradesh, which it had not done until then. So these unilateral concessions, if it's a big delusion to believe that it works. It never works. Another delusion we have is that we are almost a superpower. Lots of Indians believe that we are about to be a superpower in 5-10 years. Are you people kidding me? We are a poor third world nation with a tremendous amount of problems. So many problems. Corruption, this, that, what not. Yeah? Superpower? Even China is not a superpower. There's only one superpower, the US. You think you can be anywhere close to that in the near future? You're going to have to work really, really hard to even be on the same level as Russia or China. Really hard. It will take at least until 2050. What superpower? I'm not making fun of people's aspirations that India should be a superpower. I would love for India to be a superpower. But to imagine that we are on the brink of being a superpower is a joke. It's a delusion. We are nowhere close to being a superpower. We are not even close to anywhere being as strong as the top three nations, the US, Russia, and China. we are we are not even in the same league as China. We may be civilizationally much older than that. It counts for nothing. The only thing that really counts in geopolitics is hard power. And we are nowhere close to even China. Forget about Russia or the US. Superpower, no superpower. Um, then this other myth of this other delusion that India is a Vishwa Guru. India is a Vishwa student right now. We have one of the world's worst education systems. And you think we will be Vishwa Guru? I mean, you have to reform the education system. To be a Vishwa Guru, we have to produce the bulk of the world's wisdom and knowledge. Right now, if you want knowledge, if you want an education, a good education, an Indian student will go to the US to get a good education. And there, he or she will have an Indian professor. That's how bad India is. So we are no Vishwa Guru. We are not even a Vishwa student right now. We are a Vishwa Kuli. Sad to say. I mean, these are delusions. Then there is this myth that English education makes you intelligent. Another stupid myth. It makes you dumb. The English language is not some superpower language that makes you automatically intelligent if you can speak in a certain accent. It's just a language. It's just a tool. So there's another delusion Indians have, that if you can speak English, you are automatically superior to everybody else, and you are automatically more intelligent than everybody else. What an idiotic delusion. Then there's this delusion that certain countries are our brother countries. I will not name them because it will upset people, but Indians have this great love for one or two countries. And lots of Indians will put those countries' flags in their social media profiles. And the citizens of those countries will be laughing privately at us and mocking us for being so stupid and delusional. Another delusion is that lots of Indians have is that it is glorious to be poor. Poverty is glorious. Suffering is glorious. And being rich is bad. It's decadent. We were the nation with the world's highest GDP for the longest time. We were genuinely rich and prosperous for the longest period of history. So why are we suddenly glorifying poverty now? Poverty and misery and all that. Lots of Indians are jealous of people who have wealth. And you automatically assume that they must have done something crooked to get that wealth, right? It's because of the system that India has that you cannot succeed unless you are corrupt. Well, things are changing now. So we should stop stigmatizing wealth. It is glorious to be wealthy, like Deng Xiaoping said, and I would like everybody in this country to be wealthy. So that's a delusion Indians have, that wealth is bad. Being wealthy is bad. And wealth corrupts you somehow. No, it doesn't. It doesn't corrupt you. It only empowers you to do things according to your nature. That's what wealth does. Another delusion Indians have. So I went to a podcast as a guest to a podcast, and the host was telling me, I'm not blaming him for this, but it seems lots of Indians believe that if somebody has been living in India for a number of years, they become naturalized citizens of India. Or if your parents or ancestors were illegal immigrants, then if you are born in India, then you are naturalized Indians. That is so wrong. That is so wrong. Illegal immigrants and their descendants can never be naturalized citizens of India. If you are an illegal immigrant, you are a criminal. Because infiltrating into India, immigrating into India illegally is obviously a crime. And India does not have the concept of jus soli, which is citizenship by birth, which the Americans have. If a child is born on Indian soil, it does not make the child an Indian citizen. So we have to understand this, that the descendants of illegal immigrants are not Indians. And illegal immigrants, if they stay 20, 30 years, they don't become Indians by naturalization. Absolutely not. We have a process of naturalization which only applies to legal immigrants, not to illegal immigrants. So there's so many delusions. I could go on. I could do a 2-hour live stream about the delusions that Indians suffer from, but I think I've covered a few. Please think about these things. Lots of Indians are delusional like this. It's not your fault. The education system doesn't teach you what you're supposed to be taught. So that's why you have these delusions. It's not your fault. It is what it is. The priest of Varanasi says Elon Musk recently tweeted about the closing of the first transgender clinic in India due to the USAid freeze. What are my thoughts about this? Well, good. There's all kinds of nefarious nonsense these USAid folks were doing in India. And because of the freeze on USAid, all of that will now be shut down. And you can see, transgender clinic. So converting regular people into transgender people. That's what they were trying to do. That was their ideology, right? The woke ideology, that everybody should be mutilated and their various organs should be transformed into organs of the other gender, or you can have multiple genders. I don't know what the hell it is. I have zero interest in that, but that's the kind of ideology and worldview they were trying to engineer in India. Now, please understand that now that Trump is in power, that woke ideology is no longer in currency. The various American corporations are no longer pushing the ideology, the woke ideology. But do understand that just because USAid is now defunct, more or less, it doesn't mean that American interference in India will end. There are so many other means and mechanisms through which they can funnel money into India. There are so many organizations. There's Oxfam, which is a UK-based organization. There's the National Endowment for Democracy. There is the Gates Foundation, the Open Societies thing, the Rockefeller Foundation. There are so many NGOs. There are so many institutes. There are so many academics that they fund. There are so many media houses that they fund in so many different ways. Just because USAID is shut down or defunct doesn't mean that the interference will end. Yeah, the woke nonsense will no longer be funded, but other stuff will most likely continue to be funded. Please don't suffer under, labor under the delusion that all of that is now over. It's not over by any means. The missionary conversions will continue. They will continue to be funded by outside money. Billions of dollars every year. That's going to continue. That's not ended. There's much more that will continue. So, yeah, please have a realistic perspective on this matter. Yeah, this is a question. Yeah. Okay. Vikram Geopolitical, McLevin, Sanat, Vikramaditya Rathore. How do you look at Trump's recent move of introducing a gold card for $5 million US? I don't think it'll have much effect on India, as not many would spend 45 crore rupees for US citizenship. Many European nations also have such visa policies which are a lot cheaper. US is giving a Trump gold card where you can get a US green card for $5 million. Do you think it's a good move? How will this affect India? Will this significantly escalate the money drain from India, as our millionaires may like the deal? What's my opinion on this? To attract foreigners to invest in the US and create jobs and become citizens in the future. Can this move really help the US economy, or will it be a ticket for billionaires and millionaires to secure a haven in the US? First of all, this golden ticket, or whatever it's called, visa by investment, green card by investment, that scheme already existed. It used to cost just $1 million, just $1 million. But now it's going to cost $5 million. So it was already there. So whoever wanted to purchase a US visa, all they had to do was spend $1 million. You had to invest that in a US company or some business, or start a business and employ a certain number of people. And then you get a green card in a short period of time, a reasonably short period of time. So that was already there. Now it's more expensive, 5 times as expensive. So earlier it was $1 million, which is what, 8 point something crore rupees, right? Now it is about 45 crore rupees, much more expensive. But now it's a golden green card, not a green card, it's a golden card. So you have many more apparently privileges, which I'm not sure what they are. I haven't looked into it, but yeah. How will this affect India? First of all, it's a good great step for the US. They're monetizing the fact that they are the most popular destination worldwide for people who want to immigrate to a first world country. And they could pay off their entire national debt through the money they receive through this. You only need a few million people to buy this golden card for that to happen. So it's great for the US economy. How will it affect India? I don't think it'll affect India a lot. I'm sure there are lots of people in India who can afford that $5 million, 45 crores. But if somebody has only, let's say, 50, it's not only, it's a tremendous amount of money. Let's say you have 50 crore in your account, all your assets combined, 50 crores. Would you be willing to spend 45 crores out of that to get yourself a golden card? I think you may not. So it will attract only the super rich Indians, the top 0.01% perhaps, and it's not going to be a big dent on the Indian economy. But if you have that sort of wealth lying around, maybe you can do it and get yourself a nice US golden card. But like someone pointed, like who pointed, like Vikram Geopolitical pointed out, many European nations and other nations have such visa policies. I think St. Kitts and Nevis has a nice passport scheme. You essentially get to buy a passport if you invest, I don't know, whatever amount of money. Various EU nations have these golden visa schemes, permanent residency. I think you can even buy a passport in some countries by investing a certain amount of money. I think there's Cyprus is a good example, I believe. And I believe Portugal, in case some of you are interested, Portugal has a great scheme, I hear, and so on. So it's not only the US that has these schemes. Many countries have this, but this is for the super wealthy people. Okay, someone who has $5 million in loose change lying around in a pocket or in a drawer somewhere. If you are one of those people, then it's a good option for you. But it's a great way of thinking. The US is a nation that's so attractive to lots of people. Most powerful country, wealthiest country, great living standards, most prestigious passport to have. So yeah, you leverage that and put a price tag on that. And you obviously will vet people, whoever applies. So I think it's great, but I'm not sure how much of an impact it's going to have on the Indian economy. It's possible many people may sell off the real estate to raise some extra money. And so real estate prices may be affected perhaps as a consequence of this. But we'll see. I don't think it's going to have too big of an impact on the Indian economy. Okay. Joy Debnath says the Silicon Valley AI, artificial intelligence folks, say that AGI, artificial general intelligence, will be achieved within 1 or 2 years. Do you think the US military has already developed AGI internally and is advancing towards artificial super intelligence? How might this impact the US's role as a global superpower? Could it make them unbeatable? So first of all, let me define these two terms, AGI, ASI. AGI is artificial general intelligence, which means an artificial intelligence system, AI system, that has roughly about 130 human equivalent IQ. 130 IQ for humans is supposed to be reasonably intelligent. 150 plus is genius level, I believe. And 110, 120 plus is reasonably intelligent. So 130 is a good amount of intelligence. I think top 10% or something IQ. So an AI system with a human equivalent 130 IQ is what they call AGI. I don't entirely agree with that. If you have human level intelligence, you should also have the ability to say no. But AIs don't have the ability to say no to any task that's given to them. So that's where there's a difference. But okay, 130 human IQ. That's an AGI system, artificial general intelligence. Then what's ASI, artificial super intelligence? So an ASI system is a system that AGI will create iteratively. And an ASI system, artificial super intelligence, will have an IQ of about 300 or 500, which is superhuman. No human can have 300 IQ or 500 IQ, but this system will have that. So it's going to give you technological breakthroughs that are in the realm of science fiction or even magic. Okay, so that's the deal. So that's why there's this big artificial intelligence race that's going on. And right now it is said that we may have AGI in maybe 1 or 2 years. So we have a number of AI systems that are available to the general public. There is Open AI's GPT series, GPT chat GPT thing, and there is Claude. There is the Chinese DeepSeek R1, and there is a number of other systems. Okay, and all of these are reasonably intelligent. I believe the latest Claude version is super at coding and so on. And it is being said that an AGI system may be available in a year or two. What I believe is that behind closed doors, they have already achieved AGI. They may be on the brink of ASI. I am certain about that. See, what they're showing to the world is just a fraction of their actual capabilities. That's always how the world works. So I am 100% certain that AGI has already been achieved. 130 human IQ level artificial intelligence. Behind closed doors, you may even be at 250 or 300 IQ level. So yeah, I am pretty sure they already have way more powerful AI systems than what we can see in the public domain. And that would make the US unbeatable. It would transform them from a superpower into a hyperpower. And all these little petty geopolitical issues will become completely irrelevant. That's how powerful they'll become. So what that does is that it gives them technological breakthroughs that nobody can beat. That's technology is always, see, at any given point in history, at any given time, the greatest power was always the most advanced technological power. Always. Even if you look at the Mongol Empire, they had technology. They took whatever technology they could acquire from wherever they could. They didn't care who was the source, and they synthesized it into the biggest, baddest, meanest, leanest, deadliest fighting machine ever. So yeah, so this could give them, it could transform them from a superpower into a hyperpower. Yeah, it could make them unbeatable, and I'm pretty sure that they are almost there, more or less. More or less. Okay. Let's take some more questions, and then if there's time, I'll take questions from the live chat as well, a few. Recently, they are saying that there's an asteroid 2024 YR4 which will impact the Earth in 2032, and Mumbai is in the range of the impact, possibly in the zone where the asteroid could potentially impact the Earth. What are my views about this? So yeah, there's an asteroid which apparently could, its orbit could intersect with the Earth's orbit in 2032. Right now, they're saying there's about 3% roughly probability of this happening. Okay, the probability is roughly around 3% right now. So in the future, as we study the asteroid better and we get a better understanding of its trajectory, if its orbit around the sun, the probability of impact will change. It will either go towards 0% probability, or it will go towards 100%. In the unfortunate eventuality that the probability of impact with Earth becomes 100%, then there is a certain area of the Earth, a certain zone where the impact will happen. I hope it never happens, but let's consider the possibility. And that impact zone, it goes across India, and Mumbai seems to be part of it. So if we are unfortunate, the asteroid may impact India and perhaps Mumbai. If that happens, it's end of the story for Mumbai. If it impacts some other part of India, maybe in a forest or in a hill range or mountain range or whatever, it's not going to cause too much damage. I haven't yet seen how large the asteroid is. Depending on the mass of the asteroid, you can estimate its the amount of energy such an impact would give out in terms of kilotons of TNT, which is typically how you calculate the fallout of a nuclear weapon. So what should we do? I think India, I'm surprised India has not taken any action. See, it's possible to divert an asteroid. If there's an asteroid that is going to hit the Earth in a certain amount of time, if you have sufficient time, you can divert the trajectory of the asteroid and ensure that it does not hit the earth. There are multiple ways of doing it. Hollywood will say that you should nuke the asteroid, which is not a good idea. Nuking an asteroid is not a good idea. It's not going to work. What a nuclear explosion on an asteroid does, it pulverizes the asteroid, it breaks it up into hundreds of thousands, maybe millions of pieces, and they are flung far away. But eventually, because of the center of mass gravity, they will all slowly, over months and years come back together, and then the Earth will be hit by not one asteroid but a million pieces of asteroid, and that may not be very nice. Generally, it doesn't work well. Simulations have shown that. A better way of doing it, of diverting an asteroid, is by using a gravity tractor. You send a spacecraft to shadow the asteroid, and through the gravity of the spacecraft, you slowly tug the asteroid in a different direction, slowly, gradually. But if you have enough time, you can change the asteroid's trajectory sufficiently so that it will miss the impact with the Earth. So what India should do is set up a space force. India should start studying the asteroid itself, and in the eventuality that it's going to be in a position to impact the Earth, India should set up a space mission to send a gravity tractor to the asteroid to divert its trajectory. Maybe work with China, work with the US, work with the Russians, whoever. The Chinese have immediately set up a space force to study this. India is still sleeping. We have ISRO, we have so many scientific personnel, we are doing nothing. Very, very passive approach by India. It's a great opportunity for India to show its prowess to the world and ensure that India doesn't get nuked by an asteroid. So I would urge the government of India to wake the hell up and please take action on this. Set up a space task force to monitor and do whatever is required when it comes to this asteroid. In case we find that it's going to hit the Earth, we should be ready with a plan and with the means to divert the asteroid and ensure it doesn't hit the Earth. We need to do that. If you agree with me, let me know in the comments. Atul Mishra says, you have no idea, sir, how huge fan I am watching your videos from the start. Thank you so much. I really appreciate that. Genuinely, very much so. The question is, what is the current status of Bharat's sovereignty, and what are the chances, what are the challenges it is facing? Adding to that, what is the most important part? What key points should India under Modi ji and hopefully whoever else in the future, Yogi ji perhaps, what key points should India focus on in order to strengthen its sovereignty? See, I am very clear about this. I've said this in the past many times, that there are only 4 genuinely sovereign nations in the world: the US, Russia, China, and India. India's sovereignty is, you could say, it's slightly iffy because some of our territories in Pakistani hands, and there is the issue of Manipur, which kind of encroaches on our sovereignty. If you have a few lakh illegal immigrants squatting on Indian territory, but if you disregard all that, we are still a fully sovereign nation, and we'll hopefully resolve the issue in a certain time frame. So what are the things India should do to strengthen its sovereignty? Right, that's the question you're asking. First of all, our borders need to be fenced. Okay. First of all the borders need to be fenced, and wherever you're not fencing the borders, you need to have sufficient armed personnel who are not corrupt at the border, so that they will not take for 2,000 rupees to bring illegal infiltrators in, which allegedly has been happening in very large numbers in the past, allegedly. All right, so that's what needs to happen. Get rid of the corruption in the paramilitary forces that are in charge. Get rid of the alleged corruption in the paramilitary forces that are in charge of safeguarding our borders. Secondly, we need to ensure that the borders are fenced. Thirdly, get rid of all the illegal immigrants. Tremendous number of illegal Bangladeshis, Rohingyas, and Cookies in India. We need to deport them all. Every single illegal infiltrator should be deported, no matter what the ethnicity. That's number 3. Okay, and then once these problems are solved, we need to end corruption in the country. The whole country runs on corruption, allegedly. I think we all know that. It's the biggest open secret in India. And then what India needs to do to genuinely safeguard its sovereignty is to strengthen its military and become technologically independent. We cannot have foreign aircraft in India. Why does Trump? Why does Donald Trump respect Emmanuel Macron but not other European leaders? It's because Macron's France makes all of its own aircrafts, its own submarines, and its own aircraft carriers. All the fighter planes are French. All the submarines are made by France. The engines are French, jet engines. Everything is French. That's why France is a quasi-sovereign nation, despite being a member of the EU and a member of NATO. India needs to be in that position. So how do we develop this jet engine? Nobody is going to give us this technology. The solution is to develop technologies that will help us develop jet engines. What's the technology? It's AI. Mr. Ashwini Vaishnav, the Minister of IT, has said that by the end of this year, India will have its own large language model, AI LLM, right? My question is, do they know what they will do with this LLM, or are we just making it because everybody has it and we should also have the prestige of having our own LLM? It's not enough to just have your LLM. That LLM is a tool that you have to use to solve problems to make us more powerful and more sovereign. So once you have an AGI system with 130 human IQ, or maybe a more powerful system with 200 human IQ level, then you can solve the intractable problem of the jet engine. Whatever is not working, fix it. How to develop a single crystal nickel blade for the jet engine. All those problems can be solved with AI. So we need to really focus on these things, our technological sovereignty, on solving these little problems, big problems actually, that have been plaguing us for so long. That's what we need to do. There's so much more we can do, but I think I've laid out a number of things that India should really do as soon as possible, and that will safeguard our sovereignty and make us more sovereign, and it will bulletproof our sovereignty. And of course, space exploration. We can't be left behind in the space race, which we kind of are right now. Yeah. Okay. Let's take a couple more questions before I take live chat questions. Okay. Oh, big question. Oja says, today I attended an event in my college, VNIT, a conference on Indian knowledge systems. God wish you were there too. Okay, thank you. The chief guest was the now Vice Chancellor of the Jawaharlal Nehru University. She, in her speech, reiterated the same things that I say about left historians, perversion of our history, Aryan invasion theory, myth, women rights in Hindu culture, and so on. It seemed to me that they watched all your videos. Okay, good to know. The question is, if such a person in power, there were many people, quite reputed people with the same views. If such a person cannot destroy the leftist ecosystem, even with the present government, what would it take for us to win? It baffles me. Good question. You know, the age-old problem, sarkar tumhari hai, lekin sarkar hamari hai, lekin system unka hai, that sort of thing, right? Everybody has to, every time there's a transition of power, the new incoming administration faces these problems. And now the Modi government has been in power for 11 years. They're still facing the problem. And it's not the fault of the Modi government. Please understand this. It's like this. See, right now, Trump has come to power. And he wanted the Epstein files to be released to the public, but the FBI is not cooperating. They're not releasing all the documents. They're hiding stuff. They're suppressing information. They are not releasing it to the government of the US, the FBI. And the head of the FBI, the director, is Kashyap Patel, a long-time Trump loyalist. He has recently been appointed the head of the FBI, but they are not obeying him. You see? It's just like the VC of the JNU. So the commander is one person. The commander wants things to be done, but the foot soldiers are refusing to obey. So that's the problem you face. And that's the problem we are facing in India. The Vice Chancellor of JNU has these views, but all the staff, all the academic staff, they have other views. In India, it takes much longer to change things. Once you are a government employee and you get a job in a government university, for example, you have a job for life. You can't be sacked. So these people are there forever, essentially. As long as they are not retired, they'll be in power. So the foot soldiers, the academic staff, the professors and the teachers and so on, they all have these leftist views. And you cannot legally fire them. Otherwise, they'll take you to court, and then there's going to be a whole new fiasco. Yeah. So that's why it's going to take long time in India. Everything takes time in this country, and that's why the country doesn't progress fast, and that's why we get left behind. So the problem is this: the commander wants things to change, but the foot soldiers don't want it to change. So eventually, we have to replace all the foot soldiers with good people. Right now, they're all rotten, most of them at least. That's the problem. Okay. Vishwambar Chauhan says, should I pursue an MSc master's degree in astronomy from a newer IIT, or a MSc in physics from a prestigious IIT, considering long-term career opportunities and research prospects in astronomy? Look, how many jobs do we have worldwide for astronomers? People who look into telescopes and look at stars, planets, blah, blah, blah. Very few. There are very few jobs for astronomers in the world. Very few job openings. In India, next to none. How many astronomical observatories do we have in India? Very few. Very few. So it's going to be very hard for you to get a job in astronomy as an astronomer once you get your degree in astronomy. That's just the sad fact. Maybe you love astronomy. I used to love astronomy as a kid. I still do. I love all that. But, to be practical, you will have much more opportunities, job opportunities, etc., if you have a master's degree in physics, because physics has so many applications, including in technology, engineering, and so on. If you have an MSc in physics, you can branch out into lots of different fields. So I would say, from a practical, realistic perspective, you should go for your MSc in physics, not for an MSc in astronomy. Just my suggestion, because you asked. Manu Krishna says, will Zoroastrianism make a comeback in Iran? I hear many people are reverting back to original Persian culture or becoming atheist. Right now, I think a very significant percentage of the population in Persia, in Iran, is atheist. People have become atheists. I'm sure many of them would like to become Zoroastrians, Zarthostis, which is their kind of original religion. But they don't know how to. They don't know how to. They don't know what are the precepts of the religion, how the rituals are done, and so on. That's why they are simply choosing to become atheists. Maybe I would say they can connect with our Zoroastrians in India. We still have, I don't know how many, 40, 50,000 Zoroastrians in India. So maybe the Persians can reconnect with their long lost, far away, distant relatives who live in India, and maybe they can revive Zoroastrianism. It would be nice if that happens. It would be nice. Okay, let us take some questions. I have more questions from the comments, but I'll take some questions from the live chat. As always, that's the tradition here. Okay, what do we have? B-Chain G says, how to study higher education without English? And that's the problem. You can't right now. In India, if you want high quality higher education, it's going to be in English, right? So even if you want to do it in your mother tongue, it's going to be very difficult for you. Probably you won't get the option. And that's the problem. Why don't we give people options to do what they want? And why don't we discriminate based on the language you have studied in? We need to reform the education system. We have to rationalize it, but we're not doing it. So yeah, that's the problem. You can't right now. That's the problem. That's the issue. Okay, what next do we have? KJ Wonder says, when will the next Understanding America episode come? Next week, next Thursday. It's coming. It's been a slightly delayed thing, but it's going to get back on track from next week onwards. So yeah, thank you for watching. Appreciate that. Okay, what else? McLevin says, what's the fifth dimension? Saw Interstellar recently. If you watch Interstellar, there's this concept of the Tesseract, right? At the end, when the guy, I forget his name, he dives into the black hole, and apparently it's a portal to a different place and all that. And he enters a tesseract, which is a four-dimensional structure or five-dimensional structure. What is it? Is a tesseract four-dimensional or five different? The tesseract is four-dimensional. So look, in general relativity, we have four dimensions: length, breadth, height, and time. Those are the four dimensions in general relativity. And in interstellar, they describe a four-dimensional structure, which we can't really visualize. The fifth dimension is hypothetical. We have never observed any dimensions beyond four, but you can construct theories of physics using five dimensions. It's called the Kaluza-Klein theory, and yeah, it's very interesting actually. It throws some very interesting insights in the relationship between electromagnetism and gravity. It's called Kaluza-Klein theory. And then you have string theory, which is 10 dimensions, 11 dimensions. You even have 26-dimension bosonic string theory, and so on. So the fifth dimension is simply a mathematical construct, and it's done with the objective of trying to figure out the workings of the universe better. So yeah, if you're interested, you can look into. Let me just Google it for you and put that on the screen. It's called Kaluza-Klein theory. Let me put that on the screen very quickly. Five-dimensional spacetime, Kaluza-Klein theory. There you have it. All right, fifth dimension. There you have it. So check it out if you are interested. Okay. What are the questions? See, when you're doing questions, trying to get questions from the live chat, it's not always easy to find the right questions. Okay, Madhav Sharma says, which country is best if you want to become a scientist in a foreign country? The US. No question about it. The US. Okay. Grimzobad says, do you think Trump shouts at Modi the same way he did with Zelensky in the back doors? I don't think so. I'm sure they have tough discussions. I'm sure there will be elements of what you could call arm twisting. I'm sure there'll be threats. I can fund Pakistan. I can get Pakistan to do this. I can lift the restrictions on Pakistani F-16s and the kill switch and so on and so forth. There can be all kinds of threats. But I don't think there is any shouting. Because Mr. Modi is the kind of person who knows how to conduct these things with dignity. He knows diplomacy really well. He knows how to interact with somebody like President Donald Trump. He knows what Mr. Trump likes, what he wants, what he needs. And Mr. Modi also knows that there's no point trying to be obstinate with Mr. Trump, because Trump will get what he wants because he has so much leverage. So you have to do your homework and do the negotiations and diplomacy in a way that is as much win-win as possible, as much mutually beneficial as possible. And I don't think Trump is out there to extract every last, every last drop of juice out of India. He's not an unfair person. Yeah, he wants wins. And he wants to remind every nation that I am greater, I'm bigger, I'm stronger, I'm better. But I don't think he's out to destroy every nation. So I don't think there is that sort of shouting and that sort of disgraceful behavior ever between Mr. Trump and Mr. Modi. There will be disagreements, but you can address and approach disagreements in a tactful manner. That's what Mr. Zelensky doesn't understand. So I don't think it's that way at all. I'm sure there is tough negotiations, no question, but I don't think there's any shouting or any such thing, because if that happens, then when they come out for the press conference, you will see some strain between them, which is never there. So I'm pretty sure it doesn't happen that way, and that's because of the way Mr. Modi does his diplomacy and ensures that all the homework is done before there's a meeting with Mr. Trump. Okay. Karan Alawat says, which professions are expected to be successful in the future and remain largely insulated from AI impacts? Long term, nothing. Right now, yeah, if you're a carpenter, if you're a plumber, if you're a mechanic, if you do engineering work, if you construct highways and so on, yeah, you may be insulated from AI impacts, but eventually robots will take up all these things. Eventually, it's going to be very hard to predict what will be insulated, which fields, which professions will stay insulated from AI. I think nothing eventually in the next 20 years will be insulated from AI. We'll have to wait and watch. Uh, yeah, that's a pretty complicated question actually, but I think it's right now all bets are off. Okay, I'm going to end the live stream right here. Thank you so much. I answered this question in the very beginning, Janvi. Why don't you take questions from the live chat nowadays? It's because in the live chat, it's not easy for me to find the really good questions. When I take questions from the comments, I can pick and choose the best questions that are the most relevant to this week, what's happening in the world right now, and questions that hopefully I haven't answered before, and the questions that will give the best value to the audience. In the live chat, I will, all questions are good. I have no issue with people asking simple questions. I'm always happy to answer questions, but most of these questions I have answered before. So I don't want to repeatedly answer the same question over and over again. Like, when are we taking back POK or whatever, So that's why I take questions from the comments. And yeah, once in a while, I should still do live streams in which I take questions from the live chat also. But it's about giving the best value to the audience. That's why. Right. And with that, we will end this live stream. So thank you so much for all your questions. Very interesting live stream, very interesting questions. And we shall continue this next week. Until then, take care. Keep raising your standards, keep asking questions, and I'll see you very soon next week.